Barking right outside. Okay, good evening. So, great. Let's see here, show captions. Okay.
Maybe it's okay, but can't tell. Hey, everyone. Can I just move this just?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. Welcome, everyone. Catherine's here. You can come up here to panelists.
Oh, hold on a second.
Right there.
Where is it?
Right there.
Okay.
Yeah,
we have Catherine McCrum with us today for a little chat.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Hey, hi, Catherine.
Hi, everybody. Hello. Hi,
Hey.
Thomas. Hi, Shana.
Yeah.
So we can hear. Welcome. So yeah, we wanted to maybe first we'll say hello to people before we get started, just to give people a chance to get in here. You don't have to go too far away. But I wanted to just let you know what we're going to do. We're going to talk about writing in the flow. Of course, this is what we all want, right? We all want to spend as much time as possible in the flow. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what that entails. Catherine has some unique perspectives to bring. She is the Feldenkrais practitioner in our courses, but she also has other experience that she brings to the table. So we're going to talk about that. And maybe she'll even treat us with a little Feldenkrais mini lesson, I'm hoping, to bring us into our bodies at some point. Here, I could use it. So say hello to everyone. Barbara Farinos is excited for this session. Yes. Catherine
Hi,
Klaus.
Barbara.
Good morning from Arizona. Good morning.
Yeah.
Terry says hi from Northern California. Hi. I hope you're not drowning.
Yeah. So those of you who've been in our courses know Catherine, of course.
We should introduce.
But yeah,
Talk about who she is.
I think there are a couple of people who haven't been in the courses. Yeah, so we should introduce Catherine, or Catherine, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I've been working with Thomas and Shana since 2018. And I approached them because I teach a movement method, which is all about really finding the most optimal way to move in any situation, but with the least amount of effort. And they put out some blog or a newsletter, and I thought, well, they're teaching to horses what I teach to people, so I think I'd be really, really great to work with them. So I approached them, and Shana got back very quickly, I think, and suggested we work together. So I was really super surprised, but and it went really well, and people really liked what we did. Most people. And I've been sort of developing lessons. We started with very pure Feldenkrais. So that the method I teach is called Feldenkrais. It works with developing neuromuscular pathways, sort of maps for movement, so that you're not continually going along your old familiar routes, but developing new routes, which are more appropriate to, well, for example, the kind of movements that you need for riding, the subtlety of the aids, the nuances, which I think separate what you would call a really excellent rider to what most of us probably are, which is a little bit everyday, an average. So I was, as we went through the years, I started with quite pure Feldenkrais. And then I started to kind of get very specific and aim it towards the students that Thomas and Shana attracted to their courses. And where we are now, we do, the lessons have really evolved a lot. And I'm really sort of targeting them towards Thomas's themes for each module, or the imagery that he's presenting, which makes it, I think, very kind of easier to take something which is like, oh, that's a nice feeling, I feel like I can move more easily. It makes it more concrete, and it makes it practical. And I think it gives people really solid solutions to some of the seat problems that they come across, all of us come across. So
Yes.
that's me. And I haven't told you much about Feldenkrais, but in a way, I think how I apply Feldenkrais to Ritter dressage and Ritter work is more important. And you can take your time to Google about Feldenkrais if you want to learn more.
It's fascinating stuff, actually.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah.
Would you mind talking a little bit about your background pre-Feldenkrais?
Oh, yeah.
That actually is relevant, even though it's
Yes.
not about writing, it's relevant to what we do here.
Yes.
What we're talking about today.
Do you mean the okay, so yeah, before I trained as a Feldenkrais practitioner, I was a ski instructor for I don't know, a long time. I did sort of 12 or 13 seasons teaching skiing all over the world. I trained ski instructors, and yes, and within that that work, I was very motivated by improving my performance, and I was very ambitious, really. When I started teaching skiing, it was in the 80s, and women's ski instructors, we had to work so much harder and be so much better than the men to get private lessons, to get good groups, to get top level skiers to work with. And I was
seriously, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's changed enormously now. It's not like that at all. But in those days, it really was. I was absolutely determined that I was going to be as good as the guys, and I was a workout demon. I ended up being a personal trainer and teaching exercise for quite a while, crossing over with the skiing, and then going after I finished skiing. I trained in Pilates and for 4 or 5 years, and then I discovered the Feldenkrais, and I realized I'd been working an awful lot harder than I needed to. I was really, really fit, and yet I would be skiing and I was incredibly fit and I was incredibly strong, but I would have these moments where I would lose the right side of my body, or I'd lose my right ski, and I had no idea why. But through the Feldenkrais, I learned about the particular movement habits that I had, which I hadn't been aware of. And when I learned about them, I was able to start to move in a different way. So I really started to know and feel what I was doing in every moment of every turn, which meant that I could become my own sort of ski teacher. It was a really seminal moment for me when I'd be looking at these guys. Maybe I'd look at a World Cup skier and I go, well, how's he doing that? And then because of the Feldenkrais work, I could see how he was doing that, and I could start to do it, not at the same level of athleticism, but I could start to reproduce the movements, which was really exciting. So that's what I kind of hope to bring to, you guys, is that, what is it that the top riders do that makes it look so effortless? What is it that they don't do, actually, a lot of the time, that makes it look so effortless? And yeah, so that's my kind of route into the riding. I rode a lot when I was young, but it was, crazy cross country and that kind of stuff. Wasn't very sophisticated. And then I came back to riding about 8 or 9 years ago, and I have a horse that's challenging and interesting, and I've had to be very, very flexible and adaptable. And Shana and Thomas have helped me enormously. Yeah.
He's a great teacher.
Yeah.
He really is. Yeah, he really is. I remember because he came from a show jumper background, and I love to jump. And the first yard that I went to, the livery yard, or barn as you call it in America, they said, oh, he's a schoolmaster. Well, they didn't know what kind of schoolmaster he was, because he sure wasn't the kind of schoolmaster that most people think of in like a lesson horse. He was more like, unless you do it exactly how I like, I'm not going to do anything at all.
Like a headmaster, more like, like whacking on the knuckles.
Yeah, absolutely. And he can be a bit of a white knuckle ride, but he's one of those explosive horses, but not so much these days. Yeah.
Not so much.
No, not so much.
Yeah, he's rewarding you for all your
He
effort.
really is. He really is. Yeah.
Rewarding you by going really nicely these days.
Yes, he does. Yeah, he does. Yeah.
in the flow, to bring it back.
Very much in the flow and very much with him. And, you know, I'm speaking from my perspective of working with him, is he really is a horse that I have to do less and less and less and less with. You know, to the point of I can have the tiniest amount of tension or excess tension in one inner thigh muscle, and he doesn't like it. So he will just brace through his left shoulder and kind of go, no, not having it. So it's been a fantastic lesson in going beyond the type of awareness that I needed for skiing, because snow, however responsive it is, it doesn't have the same kind of lively feedback as an animal.
Yeah.
It doesn't have opinions.
No, not at all. Not at all. Thomas has worked with my horse. He knows he has strong opinions about everything.
It's a character.
Yeah, he's a character. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I in a way, it's funny for me because as we're talking, I'm going, well, so much of what I've been working with in developing the lessons for Ritter Dressage has been about finding flow, because it was so hard for me to find flow with my horse. It really was, you know, incredibly hard. And it's still challenging, but it is coming. And I had to kind of have a faith that I needed to continually trust that if I continue to work on feel rather than on getting stronger or those types of things, that he would actually soften of his own accord. Yeah. And that is what's happened. So there is a sense of flow. And it is, of course, as you were talking about last week, which was so interesting, there is the sort of mental side of it, and there's the body side of it. And in a sense, your mindset or the way that you think about your training needs to be embodied, and your body needs to reflect your thinking. So you kind of need to have a clear idea of the direction you're going. So if we're talking about flow, you know, flow is like a stream, but there's always a source, isn't there? And the source flows by way of the river to the sea. So for me, I needed to have a clear idea of where I was going, but have that sense that I could flow through from start to finish. And I was thinking about that quite a bit last week as you were talking.
Yeah, that makes me think about, you know, the water also follows the path of least resistance.
Yes.
And that's actually not what we often do, but what we want to do. We want to find the way to help the horse take the path of least resistance, but also for ourselves too. With the way we sit, with the way we give our aids and everything. So there's an interesting little correlation there.
Yes, I think so. And I was also thinking today, you know, when Thomas, you know, in the What, Why, How session, there was absolutely amazing arena patterns that Thomas and Shana have put together from their many years of experience of what works. And each of those patterns, in a sense, has a flow, but they only feel flowing when the horse and the rider are in balance with each other. So, you know, that's why it's so important to work on yourself. First, you know, for me, it's first and foremost. For other people, it might be secondary. Doesn't matter. But I think at some point we all come to some sort of recognition that we can only ask our horse to do these amazing patterns of, you know, I think of them as streams of movement, because how you teach them, where you get to is this sense of like, oh, we're not just changing rein here. We're coming into we're shifting weight through a smoothness and a bending and a turning, and it becomes, well, here I am skiing. But that is kind of how it feels like to do your arena patterns when it all works.
When it works, yeah. When there is no resistance, like in resistance, shifting the weight, shifting the bend, and shifting the direction. When when you remove all of those blockages that cause the resistance, it just flows. Yeah.
And actually, of course, you know, we're moving, and even as we move, if you were in any way moving with us or imagining moving with us, if you pay attention as you're moving and as you're talking, you will start to feel, oh, I really flow much more easily in this direction. than I do in that direction. Now imagine that you add in your horse and the complication of a pattern, but you only really flow in one direction. In the other direction, you're a little bit sticky. Then you're creating more difficulty for yourself than you need. And that's, or maybe than is, well, I think often with riding, you can feel, you feel, I come up against my limits. It's very challenging, all those sorts of things. And I need to understand what my limits are and what the origins of my limits are. I can do that for myself. I can't always do that for my horse, but I can do that for myself.
Yeah.
Because horses are complex beings.
Mm-hmm.
As Thomas often says, well, he from the very first moment he's observing how his horses are from when he goes to greet them at gate. Are they coming? I remember him touching Cuckoo's. My horse is called Cuckoo, and he puts his sort of hand really sort of delicately, but in a very connected way on his back, and he goes, yeah. And he's like, this level of detail in terms of your observation of how the horse was on that day just set everything up for the session. It gave you the sort of feedback into your hand, I think, where you already knew to a certain extent what he was going to be able to do, what he would be happy to do, his state of mind, how that was reflected in his body. Tension in the mind obviously produces tension in the body, and vice versa. Yes. So this is what you can do it very much for yourself.
Yeah.
And if you do it for yourself first, I think it puts you in a state where you're more able to feel your horse's state of mind and state of body.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking there are so many different, layers to flow, different aspects. You could describe it on different levels. Like earlier when we were talking about skiing, I was sort of visualizing these elegant skiers who just sort of flow with soft, swingy kind of turns down the hill instead of scratchy and jagged. So like a beginner. So there is that little physical flow of the motion, right?
Yes.
And in riding, of course, you have that. You were describing how you can flow more easily left than right, or vice versa. But then in terms of the riding, I was thinking of a horse that's trotting, really nicely through the back, and everything is swingy, everything is relaxed, and the rider is sort of part of the horse. And so without even going left or right, just sort of going along, there's a flow, Shana was saying, like water in a creek or something.
Yes.
There's that flow. And so previously I was always, in terms of flow, I was thinking of this effortless effort, Wu Wei, right? Where you do things without having necessarily to think about them, without having to make conscious decisions. But the horse, the rider feel transparent to me, like we're one vessel, and the energy just goes everywhere, and I can direct it anywhere. I feel every corner of the horse's body, and I can send my energy into any corner of the horse's body. So there's that whole other kind of dimension.
Exactly. And that's what often what often people describe as a state of flow, or flow state, or in the zone.
Exactly.
Yes.
Which is, I think, part of what happens when you find, I think what I found through the Feldenkrais work. I'm also a psychotherapist, so I'm very interested in the connections between how your habits of thinking influence your way of moving, and vice versa. But I have found through really bringing myself to a practice where I do some sort of movement pretty much every day, it sets me up to be in what you're describing, Thomas, which is in the zone or in a state of flow. So that is more likely to happen, rather than that kind of, that wonderful moment, but how do I get back there? I think I have a pathway to get into the state of flow, which I didn't have before, and was a huge frustration when I was teaching skiing, because I was a good skier, but I wasn't good as what I wanted to be. And that came after I gave up teaching. It was actually, in a sense, it was when I was taken away from the restrictions of teaching within a theoretical framework, which was according to a ski instructors alliance of a particular country. I was able to find my own way, and that really opened things up for me. But yes, I think that's right. It's what are these things which can help us get into the zone, into a state of flow? Because it's a really amazing feeling, isn't it, what you're describing?
It's
But it's quite elusive.
I said in my when I wrote, it's addictive. It's
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
You never want anything else. That's all you want.
Yeah.
And there's also this single-minded focus,
Yes.
that goes along with it, or that's, I don't know, the prerequisite. And sometimes, when you realize you're in the flow, you're already out of it again. Like once you become aware of it, you think, oh, I'm in the flow, then it's over.
It's
right?
like meditation in a way. Once you realize, oh, I'm not thinking, suddenly you realize I'm thinking about not thinking, and that's thinking.
Yes, and that's, I mean, presence has become something that people talk about a lot these days in a way that we just wouldn't have even talked about 10, 20 years ago. So there is this sort of idea that, we need to be in the moment and present. And yet I think that humans need to do a practice to train yourself to be in the present. And that could be practicing, it could be practicing on the go, so that every time you are with your horse, you're practicing presence. But I don't think it's a state that human beings arrive in without effort. I think
some training of some sort.
Yeah, you have to train yourself. I've had to train myself to, to notice intrusive thoughts, or thoughts which aren't actually conducive to being present with my horse, or in the zone with my horse, and park them.
Yeah.
Preferably, I've parked them before I get there, but I'm fallible like everybody else, so often I haven't.
Or I like to acknowledge them and then say thank you, but I don't need you right now.
Yes.
Over there.
Yes. Yeah, and actually, of course, being in the moment, or as Alison is saying, it's microseconds that we're in the moment. The idea that we're in the moment, for great rafts of time is delusional. It just isn't the case.
Yeah.
And it requires a certain focus, right? And in Zen meditation, they use breathing and paying attention to the breath. And I was just thinking, you can use movements to be in the moment, because these movements require attention, right? And of course, riding is perfect, right? Because if you ride an exercise pattern, then you're turning and you're doing transitions and you're riding lateral movements or whatever. And so you have to pay attention to the pattern. You have to pay attention to the horse and how the horse is performing the pattern. So then that requires so much concentration and attentiveness that there is really no brain space left to think of something else. Then you kind of dive deeper and deeper, and then you become more and more in the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, having seen Thomas and got to know Thomas, both, we spent some time together in Portugal and over here, and seen him work with my horse. I think you have a tremendous capacity actually to it's not necessarily that you block out everything, but you're totally with what you're doing. Totally with it. Yeah, you really are. You have a tremendous capacity for that, which actually is quite exceptional, I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes everything you have.
That's why it's looking a bit wild tonight, guys. It's like, yeah. Shana, what's our time like? What are we? I know that you've got some plans, but
well, we can go for another hour and a half if we want, but I don't know that we want to. What I would actually like to talk about how Feldenkrais can be a practice that you use. You can use other things too, but it's a practice that you can use to bring yourself into that present moment, as a somatic practice that connects your mind to your body and brings everything down. I have anxiety and stuff, and this always calms everything down. It's like it soothes all of those fried nerves,
jangly bits.
Yes. And of course, our horses, not only does this help us to ride better, our horses also appreciate it when we can go to the horse with this calm. energy when we're in our body and not just kind of flying around out over here with all of our thoughts, like this little image I had drawn, with all these thoughts everywhere, because that's how it feels like sometimes, at least for me. You have all these thoughts everywhere and you have to kind of bring them all in and bring it into your body. Not that you want all this junk, but you need to calm all of that and bring yourself out. Not out here, but back in here.
Yeah.
And I find that the Feldenkrais lessons that you do are amazing for bringing me into my body in a very short amount of time. Whereas I could do yoga for 45 minutes and that might or might not do it. Depends on if I focus or if I'm daydreaming.
Yeah.
Meditation often can do the trick, but this actually, instead of spending 20 minutes meditating, I can spend 6 to 10 minutes doing a Feldenkrais lesson that you teach, and it's within a minute. It's like already I'm feeling, whoa, wow. So could we talk about this?
Yes. Do you know, I think it's interesting because in a sense what you're talking about in neurological terms is when we get this inner connection to ourselves, the connection to our inner sensory world, it's extremely calming to the nervous system. And I think that why Feldenkrais is so good at bringing us to, what people I see all over the internet, people are saying, ride in the parasympathetic state. Okay, so for those of you who haven't heard about this, the parasympathetic state is a state where we're receptive to learning new things. We're calm, we're not having to pay attention to danger or defensiveness or any of those things. Whereas the sympathetic state is our emergency system. And we need both of these to be operating and calibrating in a certain type of balance. There's no such thing as being in your parasympathetic or in your sympathetic. You're in both all the time. But I think what Feldenkrais does, and I think it's to do with the principles of the sort of philosophical principles about how you approach a lesson, is that I think that is what gives or creates the conditions where the more fight-flight system can kind of calm down, which can be very helpful, right? You need to have a little alertness. You definitely need that. You can't be in a totally, like you're lying on a beach or something and there's no trouble in your world. It's not like that. But it brings you to a place where you have enough alertness, but at the same time, you're learning. You're able to learn new things. You're receptive. You're not taken up with risk or being scared. And I think that what's very interesting about it is that the lessons bring you to a way of moving that is how nature meant you to move. And I don't know any other method that specifically does that. I'm sure things have developed in the last 10 or 20 years. So there'll be someone who's going, oh, well, what about this? And absolutely. But having done a lot of different exercise methods, including yoga, including, a very kind of intensive Pilates practice, which is great. And I love it. It isn't natural movement. It's not that organic movement that you see when, you see Usain Bolt running and sprinting. And that guy uses every part of his body in a way that takes him in the direction that he needs to go in the most superb way possible. Yeah. And I think the genius of Feldenkrais, the man who developed the method, is that he researched and got curious about how do all the different parts of us relate? How can we explore the linkages so that we can move in the most optimal way? And when we do that, it's almost as if our whole system feels like a sense of security. That's the best way I can put it. So if I know when I'm walking down the street that I can equally easily turn to the right and turn to the left, I can equally easily move forward, move back. And when I move forward, the whole of me moves forward. When I turn to the right, the whole of me moves right and left. Then I know that I'm safe. And when I know that I'm safe, my whole system calms down. So that, I think, is what the lessons do in a kind of, in a deeper way. The other thing they do is they, within what I've described to you, is they really make you well coordinated. And when you're well coordinated, again, you're going to feel a certain type of confidence in how you're moving, that you can trust your body to follow your intention. The intention of your mind is to go there, and your body will take you there. You don't have to think about your sore knee or your crappy back or, you know, your fallen arch. Everything is behind what you want to do. And that as well is very, very calming. So, you know, within these Feldenkrais lessons that Shana's talking about, I've taken kind of a full length Feldenkrais lesson is 45 minutes to an hour. But being realistic, you know, everybody's very busy. So I wanted to take sort of snapshots of the, there are over 2,000 or 3,000 different Feldenkrais lessons. So there's a lot of lessons out there. But I want to take snapshots of these different lessons and 6 to 10 minutes and put them into the courses so that people can do a little bit each day. And as Shana says, it surprised me. It surprised me how much people changed through them.
It was amazingly effective.
Yeah, I was really, yeah.
We were calling them kind of snacks. They were like
yes.
little
Yeah,
snacks.
the Feldenkrais snacks. And you can string them together if you want to put a longer lesson, because, you know, within every, you know, I teach a program called Feldenfit, which is 4 programs of 30 lessons. So it's 120 lessons. And there's a theme which runs through all the 30 days. So you can, week 1 of Feldenfit 1 was all about really actually developing a very intelligent core. So you could do day 1, which was 6 minutes, or you could do day 1 to 5 and have a full length lesson because they all link together. But yeah, so that was the idea. But yes, I was very surprised about how the short lessons had such an impact.
It was a nice
yeah
surprise for us. We tried these out, remember, during the lockdowns. We were like, well, let's do something.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. And, you know, I think I'm getting a little bit of the chat as we go through from some of the people who were in my courses in Ritter Dressage. And, you know, it's when you think about riding and a lot of sports, actually, the people who are teaching it will have a focus on a particular body part, which is the body part which actually they discovered and that helped them. But what they don't have is an awareness of the whole of the person or the whole of themselves. So they understand maybe, oh, they really feel their weight in their sitting bones. And they know when their weight is in a particular place in their sitting bones, that makes them feel better coordinated and better balanced than when it's another place. But what they don't feel is, well, how is your sternum related to that place you've taken your pelvis to? What are you doing with your head and your eyes? You know, how come that person there can't do exactly what I can do when I tell them to put on their sitting bones? Why doesn't it work for them? Well, it doesn't work for them because all of us have different movement patterns, habitual movement patterns. So when I go to the perfect place for my trainer on my sitting bones, I have a completely different organization of my body, which means it doesn't work.
Right.
But with Feldenkrais lessons, you understand how, when you do this with your pelvis, this changes in your sternum, your shoulders change, your head changes, your eye change and everything. And then you can start to link all these together within a pattern of movement. And then you start to understand how your body moves within these patterns of movement. And then before you know it, having only had 2 or 3 patterns of movement that you did all the time, whatever the situation, you have 10, 20, 30. Then suddenly you're, you know, I don't know, you're hoovering your house and you see something under the sofa and you suddenly realize you've got down on your knees and on your stomach, you've reached something under the sofa that you haven't been able to do for 20 years. You have that with people who are older. So, yeah.
There's some lovely comments in here. Just lovely. You guys are amazing. Yeah, so we could read some of those and talk about them, or we could
do a little bit.
Yeah,
do a little bit. Yeah. I'm thinking about something like something with the pelvis, because the pelvis is, you know, obviously
Oh, my pelvis would love that.
Your pelvis would like that. Yeah. Then we'll do something with the pelvis, and then we'll see what else, what other parts kind of, relate and link into how you move your pelvis. How about that?
So let me see. Are you guys up for doing a little impromptu
Yeah.
Feldenkrais lesson right now with us? Yes, that was quick. Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes.
good.
Oh, good, good. That's good. At least they're not saying, no, please, no, no, no. Anything.
I mean, if you could all go and get your horses, saddle them up, and then no, just. But we obviously most people, you're not going to be sitting in a saddle, but I presume most of you are sitting either on a chair or on the floor would also be fine. If you're sitting on a chair, you need to be more or less at the front edge of the chair so that your thighs, your legs are free of the seat of the chair. So, and you're not leaning against the back. And once you brought yourself to the front of the chair, or if you're sitting on the floor, you can sit cross-legged, whatever's comfortable for you, but somewhere where you're not having to work too hard to hold yourself up. And I think for many people, they find it easier to do this, to connect with the sort of inner sensations of how you're moving with their eyes closed. It's obviously entirely up to you. And so we're going to start just with a sort of check-in to how you experience your weight in the chair. And I'd like you to sink into the bones, and the bones which are in contact with the seat of your chair or the floor. If you're sitting on the floor, are your sitting bones. Very familiar. And could you get a sense of the weight of your sitting bones on your chair? That the sitting bones are part of your skeleton. And so they have a solidity, if you like, that is great for giving you feedback about your weight. And maybe at the moment you feel some muscles, but see, can you kind of melt through the muscles to the bones themselves? And then if you've got a sense of your two sitting bones, do you also feel or notice if you have more weight in one than the other? Are you more to the left or to the right? And if you don't know, and even if you do know, could you shift your weight a little bit more over one sitting bone and then over the other? And if you do this slowly and within a range where you feel no sense that your muscles are starting to push, I imagine you'll start to feel that there's a difference in the ease with which you shift to the left as to the right. Or that in one direction, you just travel further. It seems like it's almost like an open door that you can go through. And on the other side, there's a little bit of a blockage. And perhaps in the difficult direction, you hold your breath, whereas in the easy direction, your breath flows. We've been talking about flow tonight. A great way to know whether you're in a state of flow or flowing movement is any disturbance in your breath is a disturbance in your flow. And then pause back in the middle, what feels like your middle. Now, of course, you discovered that what felt like your middle in the beginning is not really a true middle. It'll be somewhat to the left or somewhat to the right. You can rest with your back against the chair if you like, whatever you feel, or you can stay where you are. And now I'm going to suggest the edge, the little finger side of your hand to touch your breastbone. So you're going to have the length of your hand on your breastbone. It can be the right hand or it can be the left hand. And go back to shifting your weight a little bit to the left sitting bone and then the right sitting bone. And use the sensitivity of your hand. Your fingers are neurologically very rich to feel, how does your breastbone travel through space as you shift over your left sitting bone, back to the middle, and over your right sitting bone. And of course, if it doesn't feel good to have your hand like that, you can put your hand across, whatever works. And does your breastbone take a different pathway in one direction to the other? Keep your hand there and imagine that your whole torso, your whole spine, the entirety of your spine, all the way from the tailbone to the crown of your head, is like one long pillar, if you like a tower. And you're going to shift your weight by leaning your tower more to the left, coming back to the middle, and then leaning your tower to the right. So the Leaning Tower of Pisa only ever goes one way. For most of us, there'll be one way that we lean more easily than the other. Your spine will be as much as possible like a stick, and so your breastbone will be tilting from one side to the other. And now we're starting to play with your habitual patterns, because for some people, this will be like, well, of course, how else would I ever shift my weight except like this? And for other people go, well, I never shift my weight like this, and it's making me hold my breath, and I don't feel any flow. Some people might have one side where they could do all day long, and the other side, it feels like they've never done this before. And then pause, let your hands rest on your thighs. And very simply shift your weight without really thinking about it, left to the right, to the left, to the right, over your sitting bones, and sense from having done something with a bit of a constraint, is the movement easier? And let's play with one more pattern. So you can again bring, if it helps you to feel your breastbones, you have a kind of relationship, you can have one hand on your breastbone and one hand on your lower belly, just above your pubic bone. So it'll be below your tummy button and above your pubic bone. And start to shift your weight, but as you shift your weight to the left, think that you're going to slide your breastbone on a horizontal plane. So you're not going to tip, you're going to almost like snake your breastbone to the left as you take your weight to the left. And then you're going to come back to the middle and you're going to snake your breastbone to the right. So your shoulders will stay horizontal, your ribs will stay on a kind of horizontal plane, but you're still shifting your weight. And what you may notice in this pattern is that your spine will kind of snake a little bit. This is like, back in the 70s and 80s, jazz dance classes were really, really big. So you kind of do these rib isolations. And then leave that and let your hands rest. And very simply shift your weight to the left, shift your weight to the right, and observe what your awareness is of when you move your weight over one sitting bone. We started just by paying attention to the sitting bones, and then we added in the breastbone. And then I mentioned ribs and shoulders, and how much of yourself can you feel in movement as you shift your weight? Do you have a new awareness of your sternum? Can you feel a little bit more how you organize this movement? And leave it, come back to where you're neither to the left or the right, and feel your middle. Feel your middle now. Feel that the sternum is a great indicator of your midline. Your tummy button is an indicator of your midline. Your pubic bone, your weight over your sitting bones is an indicator of you balanced in your midline. And then we'll come back to the group. How was your tower?
Yeah, good.
I was thinking
really well one way.
Yeah, I know. I've got this like perfect tower, and then the other side is like,
Really funny.
yeah.
Yeah.
Feels looser for
Yeah.
me a little bit.
Yeah, it's wild. It's
Interesting.
wild how much it frees
Yeah.
up. Just the
So
pain
much.
of these little movement patterns helps your body to move so much better. And then also it calms everything down, brings you in. So,
Well, it brings your attention inward, doesn't it?
yeah.
And I think what you said there is that never once did I tell you the correct way to move. There was no, you've got to tense this muscle, you've got to tighten here, you've got to do it like this, you've got to do it like that. It was just getting curious, exploring, feeling, sensing. And yet when you come back, you are more correct, so to speak. What obviously with Feldenkrais, correct is a dirty word, but there is an optimal. And I think when you come back out of those short explorations, you will feel in a more optimal alignment.
Right. I mean, I feel like it helps you to integrate all of the possibilities.
Yes.
Like
yes.
Now I had just one possibility, the other,
Exactly.
And by doing all of these things, it integrated all the possibilities, and now I can move any which way.
Yeah, and actually, when you're teaching the patterns in the courses, Thomas, one of the imageries that you've used is using a joystick to the image of your spine like a joystick in order to bring a little bit more weight onto a hind leg. So you're half halting and use the spine like a joystick. But in another movement like half pass or leg yield, you need this movement.
Yes.
It's not like huge, but it's when you move your pelvis a little bit in the direction of the yield, you need to be able to do that little bit of a yield and horizontal movement with your ribs and your chest.
Yes.
Because if you lean, you're going to push the horse in the wrong direction.
Exactly.
So sometimes you need to lean, sometimes you need to do jazz style rib isolations. Yeah,
and we have exercises where you keep moving back and forth, either by moving the horse's haunches left and right, or the shoulders, or figure eights.
Yes.
And they do the same thing where the rider constantly rotates.
Yes.
The result is that the riders and the horses become more supple and more centered somehow. So the ease of movement becomes more similar left and right, and students sometimes comment then in lessons that they feel a lot straighter or a lot more supple around their pelvis because the exercise just keeps them moving all the time.
Absolutely.
A little bit like what you just did with us.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And I think, then people go, well, I can, I find it really easy to leg yield to the right, but it's really difficult to the left. And they go, well, it's my horse is crooked, but maybe you're not really helping your horse.
Yeah. I mean, the horse probably is crooked.
Yes, that's right. But they're not going to start doing rib isolations just for you. So you might as well do them for yourself. Learn how to do them for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that was a surprise for me at one point, because we had designed our exercises strictly for the horse, and then at some point in clinics, I realized that they're helping the riders, by moving them, and then they become more even and supple, and they sit better as a result.
Yeah.
So I hadn't expected that. That was very interesting.
Yeah. And I think the other thing which is such a nice connection to your work is that when you often what we feel as resistance in the horses and in ourselves is to do with muscles that are ineffectively working against another group of muscles. So you get these agonists and antagonists which stay contracted and therefore they can't move in a kind of synchronicity. But when you're talking about the horses, you're often talking about the skeleton, Thomas. And I think that's the same with Feldenkrais. We go to the skeleton because if you can organize your skeleton to move in all the possible directions, the muscles will take care of it. You don't even have to think about which muscles you're contracting. It's very complicated to think about, I need to contract my transverse abdominis with my external oblique on the right side, and then I need my quadratus lumborum to do this. It's ridiculous. You can't do that. What you need to do is, I need to shift my weight. Oh, my pelvis isn't shifting that way. I need to be able to shift my pelvis to shift my weight. That's simple.
Right.
Oh, the top of my pelvis is tipped back. I'm behind the movement. Oh, the top of my pelvis is too far forward. I'm falling forward. Those are the sort of skeletal references, the bony landmarks, which really help in the movement in the moment when you're in a sport to kind of go, oh, I was going to swear, but I can just bring my sternum back and I'm there. It's way too complicated to do it by way of the muscles or the fascia or the anything else.
Yeah, and of course, with a horse, you can't tell the horse to engage this muscle or relax that muscle. So all you have is the bones.
Indeed, that's right.
Move your hips and so on.
That's true.
And a long time ago, I went through a phase where I was very focused on my muscles, and I felt like I need to engage this muscle so I can relax there, and it helped to a degree. But like you said, then it's complicated and more effort, and then getting to know you and your work and doing your lessons, then drove that point home that it's really about the bones and the body, then just chooses the right muscle. So I don't have to worry about it, which is really nice.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think in many ways that the work we're doing through Feldenkrais, it's very neurological, where we are developing these neuromuscular pathways. And you don't develop neuromuscular pathways through effort. You just simply do not. When you are in effort, you only strengthen what you already know. So, and I do think that's the same with the horses, is that you are working with neuromuscular pathways, and of course they have a different way of their brain is different to ours, but it's still learning. Horses have a tremendous capacity to learn, and we do too, but it isn't through force. And often when we think we're not forcing, there's so much more we can let go of. It's sort of unlimited, I think, that developing that awareness of when we're working too hard. And it's fine when we're interfering with ourselves because we pay the price, but when we're interfering with our horses and that's out of awareness, that's a bit of a shame for them, because it would be a nicer experience for them if we didn't do that or did it less.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's an interesting thing to explore, because sometimes we don't even realize that we're making an effort or that we're using strength, especially people who are strong and fit to begin with.
Used to editing a lot, It's how you got it done. So
I think that's a really good point, and I think people who are very action oriented, and that it can be hard to slow themselves down enough to be able to feel. I'm speaking for myself, actually. But it doesn't pay off not to, I've found. So I've had to restrain my desire to do and get more into this sort of state of this internal attention, internalizing my attention, and then spreading and globalizing my attention, so I have the whole of myself in my awareness, which means I can track when bits of me are tracking off in a place which isn't very helpful or functional.
Yes.
More than I could.
Yes. Well, I have a hack for that, it's that becomes the thing that I do. Instead of doing all the other things, this is what I'm doing. I'm still doing. I'm still efforting. I'm just efforting.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
Jen here was saying, I have a pink tip from all the extra work the past 9 days and like minus 50 degrees Celsius. So she says, I've been hyper aware of how my body stacks, and the Feldenkrais has been super helpful. This was a nice breakdown. Now I have ideas for lessons this weekend.
Good. Yes. Well, I wanted to sneak a little bit of, seat stuff in there.
Always good.
That's good.
So lots of comments, in the chat, and this is just the Zoom chat.
We don't know what's going on.
We're streaming to Facebook and YouTube right now too, so there's comments in there too as well. So sorry guys, I can't comment on your comments right now.
Yeah, so here Angela Shaw was saying, couldn't feel my left seat bone at first, but after the exercise, everything even and clear. And that's sort of typical, right? That's what
Yes.
happens to most people.
Yeah. And maybe there is something in that clarity. You know, I keep on wanting to come back to what you said, Shana, about, you know, a 6-minute snack, Feldenkrais snack, can bring you to this place of calm. And maybe there is something about that clarity of connection to our more internal sensory self, which is, it's a rarity to be able to find something which so effectively does that, I think, because I have done quite a bit of meditation. It takes me a lot longer to come to that state through meditation than it does through Feldenkrais. Just does.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And the added benefit, you don't just get that mental clarity, you also get this body clarity.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this, you know, when I have done a Feldenkrais lesson and you stand up, it's like everything has melted away that you could feel. It's like an absence of tense sensations. It's a very, very nice feeling.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, of course, you know, someone annoys me and it's all back. I'm just joking.
It's life.
Yeah, that's life. But yeah, of course, we can't ever stay in a state of flow, but we can have some ways to access it. It's like a source, isn't it? Finding a source.
The point is to then notice when you've come out of that, just like with meditation, notice when you come out of that and bring yourself back. And you have, it helps to have ways to bring yourself back.
Yeah, very much so.
Little movement patterns. You know, you don't have to do a whole Feldenkrais lesson to remind your body and your mind of this. You know, all you have to do is sit here for a minute and feel and repeat a little this, and then it comes flooding back. Especially if you just did it a few minutes before. That's where it can be really helpful to do one of these lessons and then go back to course and repeat some of the concepts in the saddle when you're riding.
Definitely. And we do have Charlotte's taught quite a few of those, the Feldenkrais.
Yes.
Audios that you can do in the saddle.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Charlotte Zetterberg is another Feldenkrais instructor that's an instructor in our courses. So she's also on our team. She's just not with us tonight. Hopefully bring her on another night. Yes, I think, I hope so. If she can do it with her schedule, she will be, I'm sure. Trying to get that organized. It's hard to get everybody organized.
And can you hear that in the background? Can you hear anything in the background? You can't. Okay, fine. That's right.
So
Jean-Marc's with a mortar and pestle.
All right, nice.
Good job.
Yes.
So they're slaving away.
He's slaving away in the kitchen. Exactly. You see how I get into a state of flow? I get my husband to do the cooking. It really helps.
That's the key. That's the answer. More marriage tips from us.
No.
Okay. Jen pasted some comments here from Facebook. She said, from Sharon Gallagher, listening to this now, having both sides of your body work equally, using your mind for the intention really is important. This is such important information. Sometimes I actually have to look at my hand or something so that I can see that it really is doing what my mind is thinking it is doing, and have a full awareness of my entire body at the same time. What are the relationships between the body parts? Question. I think
is that a question?
I think so. What are the relationships between the body parts?
Or maybe it's just something that she's paying attention to.
Or maybe it's something.
Oh yes, I think that's what she's. I think that's what she's paying attention to, is the relationships, the linkages, which you know, because if you see a skeleton, the skeleton is like a chain of links, basically, through the joints and the bones. And when you see how each joint is structured and the potential for movement, it becomes much more obvious the possible directions of movement that each joint can do. And then when you start to turn one joint, you'll see how it connects into the joint above.
Yes.
Which is, and you see that with martial arts. So you see with the judo, in judo or aikido, but judo, particularly if someone will take someone's hand and throw them from their hand, that is skeletal linkages.
Right.
Yes.
It's not strength.
No.
Right.
It's actually knowing the pathways into somebody's body so that you can flip them on their back with what appears to be very little effort at all.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
Lynette Best, that's quite a revealing revelation. One side dropped, other lifted with hand at the sternum.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah. Interesting the
Yeah.
things we discover about ourselves.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, lots of other comments. Allison said it helped me focus inward. Picturing the bones and the movements, closing my eyes really helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And Sharon clarified it was just a statement. Thank you.
Mm.
Yeah. And Marsha Black said, good question. I noticed my tongue moving and
Yeah.
tightening when I shifted to my awkward side. The right.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
holding your breath. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And you know, the tongue is one of the first parts of us that we develop. You know, like you think of babies and sucking, is that actually, yeah, the you can do amazing work with your tongue and with your jaw, which will change your sense of your internal core to such a large degree that it really is quite incredible. Yeah. So yes, it's a very good observation. Often people will keep their tongue a little bit more to one side than the other. And that will often be on the side where you have a bit more weight over, as an example. I'm not saying always, because there are never generalizations, but yeah,
Gosh,
you may,
that's so true.
yeah, and you may even find that the tongue on the side that you've got more weight on feels fuller and more supported, where you've got more tension on the side, which is, you know, your more activated, constricted side. And that will feed into your eyes.
Yeah.
And then that will feed into your ability to look to the right and the left with equal ease, which feeds into your ability to ride a circle on each rein equally easily.
But it's the same for the horses.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And what's interesting, what you were saying about the tongue and the jaw, because you know, in Boucher's method, that plays a big role. Like he noticed that if he was to relax the jaw, everything relaxes, and that for him was like a source of lightness.
Yes.
And that he was obsessed about that and really explored that a great deal. And you hear the French writers and the Boucherists often talk about that and all the connections, you know, with the jaw for that reason. It's really interesting how then, the horse trainers came across, you know, physiological and neurological discoveries like 150 years before, you know, science discovered how this works.
It is amazing, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a validation too, then, you know, like if science now says this is how it is, and then, you know, you realize, oh, wow, these old guys were onto something.
Yeah, and I think it's, I mean, we've had this sort of discussion in other lives that we've done, but, you know, theories generally arise out of experience. So the first person who experienced something, they then got, you know, eureka, whatever, and then they got really interested and curious on developing the theory and writing about the theory. So I think that's very true. You know, often you'll see things in these older texts where they really battened onto something which has only been proven by science.
Right.
You know, like neuroplasticity, for instance, Feldenkrais realized that we had the capacity to learn at whatever age we were, where previously it'd been thought that, you know, by the age of 16, 17, 18, you were no longer able to learn new things. That you were kind of set in stone.
Right.
But yeah, but now we know that the brain is infinitely plastic. So change in how we move is possible to the end of a life. It does get slower. I've worked with a few people in their 90s and late 90s, and even someone who was 102.
Wow.
And the plasticity is still there, but it's very, very slow. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. You can feel it. It's just such a different feeling working with someone who's, you know, like in what I would call extreme old age.
Yeah. Wow. What a unique experience.
Yeah, it's really cool, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you know, talking about, you know, can't teach an old dog new tricks, so to speak. You know, I've heard
Exactly. Yeah.
trainers say that horses need to learn all the movements in the first 3 years, so that by the time they're 6, they have to know the whole repertoire, including all the tempo changes, piaffe and passage. And
Wow.
if they don't have it by that time, then we're not going to happen anymore. And then you spend the next 3 years refining it. And it never made sense to me. I always said, no,
Doesn't make any sense
it's
at
not
all.
really true.
No.
They still learn even when they're older. You know, I've seen horses that learned advanced It's when they were older.
We've taken fairly old horses and started them over essentially, and they've gone quite far, it's yeah.
There was a question from Rochelle, actually, and it's an interesting question, because I think this is a question that will come up for a lot of people. So it's in the Q&A, Shana. I'll leave you guys to read it because it keeps it consistent. Yeah.
Sure. Rochelle says, my dilemma this week is that I want to ride in the flow and be soft and kind, everything you said. But I went to a new instructor yesterday, and in order to have my horse moving correctly and through, she had me using a lot more effort than I normally do. So can you ride to compete and be in the flow? I feel so conflicted. Yeah, good question. I mean, the competitions bring an external pressure, right? To perform, you have to do certain things at certain letters, and you have to do it right now, You can't ride another volte or two or another whatever.
And there's often an additional time constraint. Like he was talking about, a lot of the mainstream trainers, they think you have to have all the movements trained by, within 3 years of training, or, having been down the competition path before, you often get deluded into thinking you need to keep up with these tests and you have to keep it moving. And so there's this pressure that can be placed upon you. It doesn't mean you have to do it that way.
I think it's possible to, compete and be in the flow. It's just more difficult. And I think then you kind of have to follow the old master's advice that you should compete at a 1 or 2 levels below where you're training.
I think that's really good advice. Yeah.
Well within your comfort zone when you ride the test, because there's a lot of stuff outside the comfort zone that just comes with trailering somewhere and then being watched by a judge, and then everything else that goes with a show.
And if you want to enjoy your showing experience, if you want to have any chance of riding in the flow when you're competing, you want to definitely be in your comfort zone as much as possible. One of the best rides I've ever had, riding in the flow through the majority of the ride, was in a competition test. It was an Oldenburg that I was riding, and I knew because of my scores that I wasn't in the placings. It was a championship show. I knew I wasn't going to be in the placings, but I wanted to get in there in the show ring and do it. I just decided I'm just going to enjoy this ride. I'm just going to go in there and enjoy it. And I swear that is still, when I think back on that ride, it just makes me feel warm and fuzzy. It was one of the best rides I've ever had because I abandoned all of those exterior expectations. It was really about being in the moment with my horse. But we had done all the preparation beforehand. I wasn't trying to string it together in the middle of the test, so we were training at home 2 levels above where I was showing at that point, because it was the end of the competition year. So we were quite ahead. But so I was able to totally just relax in that moment. So it is possible, but you have to stick to your values. You have to stick to your way of doing it and not let somebody else's authority make you do things that you don't want to do for yourself or for your horse. And that's a hard lesson. That gets off topic of this, but we've talked about this quite a bit.
I mean, I really agree with you. And what I wanted to say to you, Rochelle, was that in my experience, and I don't know what it was like for you, but if you are experiencing a lot more effort than you normally do, it's because you're working against yourself. And it's not to say that you don't need to work on your strength and your ability to coordinate your movements and be powerful with them. But if you're feeling a lot of effort, it's generally that you're working against yourself in some way. And it seems to me from your description that you had a feeling of that push-pull of the conflict of, is this the right thing for me? Oh, I want to do this. Oh, she's telling me to do this, but I also want to do that. And that will create tension in you. If you were 100% behind what she was saying, I think you would have experienced less tension. And it may be if you work with her again, you will, you'll decide that you're 100% wanting to do what she says. But yeah, my experience is that's often a sign of like, I don't know, I'm going against myself in some way.
So true that there's a conflict there.
Yeah.
And also your point about the efforting, it's okay to effort
Yeah,
to some
absolutely,
We're
100%.
not
Yeah, of course
saying
it is.
do everything. Not we're not saying you sit on the couch and eat bonbons, you know,
No.
because
Yeah.
that would help us ride any better. You know, but so there has to be some effort, you know, there's even like you said, you still do some strength training and things.
Yeah.
It's not about abandoning all of that. It's about doing it in a way that's not working against ourselves.
Yeah. And then you won't get hurt.
Yeah, that's
You know,
it.
yeah, you won't get hurt. Yeah.
It.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question that really brings it home.
Really good. Yeah. I saw that and I thought, yeah, that's just a brilliant question, Michelle. So thanks.
For asking that question.
Yeah, Nuno Oliveira didn't compete because he said he felt that competition was incompatible with the way he wanted to ride. And that's okay too. I mean, maybe you feel like, no, I can't ride in a competition the way I want to, or, you know, but don't, you know. And if you do want to compete, if you enjoy it, then, you know, find a way to make it fun and so that you are, you know, relaxed and, you know, within that comfort zone as you're riding the test.
We have a number of students in our courses that many that don't compete, but we have many that do compete, and they try to do it in a way that stays true to their values and how they want to show up for their courses.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps it enjoyable for you. Yeah. If you feel like you're going against that, you lose the joy. Then you're doing it for a score or a ribbon or whatever, instead of doing it for the joy of that experience of being in collaboration with your horse.
Yeah, and you have to find your own ways, like with everything else, you know, and it's a lot of trial and error too. You just have to try it and see what happens, and then see, you know, how did you like this, and you know, how did the horse go, how did it make you feel, and then what can you change, can you tweak it, can you know, so it's like with everything else, like when we ride our exercises in training, it's kind of the same thing, right? You do it, you watch what happens, you see how it affects the horse, then you try maybe to adjust the exercise, or you change the way you sit, you change the way you ride, and maybe change your mindset. And it's the same with, I mean, of course, in competitions, you can't change the test pattern. Or somebody will ring a bell.
They tend to ring the bell if you go off course. Yeah.
But you can change a lot of other things, right? Change the warm-up, change your attitude. Like Shana says, well, screw it, I'm not going to win, so I'll just have fun and I'll just enjoy myself. Yeah. So you can do that. I mean, for me, I sometimes had to ride like I don't care, you know, because I was too ambitious, you know, and put too much pressure on myself. So that can work. And so everybody has to find their own way in how you do it. You know, if you want to.
There's a lovely challenge within caring about it and still doing it within your integrity.
Yeah. I've learned a lot. I mean, I'm sure you guys have learned a lot. I've learned a lot from those types of situations where I am, you know, you learn a lot, and then you learn a lot about what's important, and you know, about yourself. And I've learned a lot about my responses and to that type of pressure. It's a very interesting experience. You can get really curious about it. I think it's really interesting, but it's not always easy. No,
but there's a lot to gain by going down and exploring it. Marika has a question.
Oh yeah.
Yesterday, I did the first 2 Feldenkrais lessons of the What, Why, How intro. It had an amazing effect on the connection in my body and how centered and balanced I feel. However, at some point, I felt really nauseous and almost sick. Is this normal?
It's not that it's normal, but it's not uncommon. And I think the reason why you felt sick, it's exactly, you said it, I felt so centered and balanced. And that felt amazing, is that when you change your balance, your posture, you change how you orient yourself to space, and then people get vertigo because the habits of our posture and balance are tied up with how we use our eyes, and our eyes are tied up with our vestibular system. And if it's a little bit like being on a boat, you know, suddenly some people get sick and some people don't, but that's probably what happened, is that you changed your orientation in space. Your spine would have got long in a way that hasn't probably for a while. You would have been balanced over a different part of your feet. And then, your eyes would have been a different place on the horizon even. So it's not uncommon.
Would you say then, though, that it's something that typically
It
wears off,
typically
goes-
passes. Yeah, it typically passes. Now, in the first professional training that Feldenkrais taught in America, it was a huge training. He had something like 300 people there. He had them doing, for the first week, eye lessons for 3-4 hours a day, and everybody was like vomiting. But it completely reorganizes. It's like such a strong reorganization that a lot of people couldn't cope. But it was much more gung ho in those days. It's like, oh, we're gonna right to the heart of your ineffective patterns and habits, and
it's rid of the wimps, right?
Yeah, exactly. He was real.
Sorted out.
Yeah, exactly. He was really old style, but yes. So
funny. That's so funny in a way that he did that, because that seems like it goes against his philosophy, right?
I know, it's
So,
totally. I know.
He
was like, I mean, that guy had a very tough start in life, and he was, he was a tough guy.
Yeah.
Feldenkrais walked from the Ukraine to Israel when he was 12 without his family, and the only thing on the road was sold were these bits of pork, and of course he didn't eat pork being Jewish, but he made himself eat pork. 12 years old, and he was sick every single day until he could eat pork, and he wasn't sick anymore.
Wow.
But yes, I mean, that was back in the 20s, so it was a different time.
Different time for sure.
Yeah.
In the 20s, wow.
Yeah.
Marika says, "Oh my God, yes, thank you so much. I love the Feldenkrais and was in shock about how massive the effect was."
Yeah, it can it can be quite. Oh, wow, yes.
So what do you suggest if that happens? Just
generally, that's what I do, Thomas. I just go, let's do some more. So can I really make myself throw up? Or alternatively, do some stuff with your feet. That generally helps.
Interesting.
Walk around.
Feet, and sometimes breathing exercise can help with nausea. So just depends. Walking around, but yeah.
I actually find, that has happened to me. But usually it's been after a functional integration session, and kind of doing this and just kind of bringing my head back into my body. Scrunching
compressing yourself back.
That helped. Actually, so that's
interesting.
Maybe it's not the right thing to do, but that helps. It was like, ooh, it's like I felt like I was separated, Yeah. I think we will start to wrap it up here. I do want to let everyone know that the What, Why, How course is open for enrollment. It contains Feldenkrais lessons, but so much more. I'm going to drop the link for you in here. We start on Monday, January 22nd. There's so much information on the link that I'm going to leave for you, and you can also email me. And if you are not sure if it's a good fit for you, just email and we can set up a little one-on-one meeting time to talk about it and see if it's a good fit for you. Let me find my link. That's the problem. I have so much open on my computer. Yeah, I know he's laughing at me.
I was just thinking of these memes, my brain is like a browser, is like 19 tabs open and blah, blah, that sort of thing.
Here we go. There you go. That is the link to enroll in the course. We would love to see you in it. Of course, you have Catherine, you have us, you have so much more.
Yes, and some other wonderful people too.
Yeah.
So they tell me, you never know.
So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming.
Being here and participating in this interesting conversation.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's lovely to meet you remotely, and I hope to see more of you in the courses. It'd be great. There's so many familiar faces, familiar names. It's lovely to come on and see so many familiar names and new ones. Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Catherine, for
chatting. Thanks, everybody. Bye.